disturb me from my slumber. I'm the Eternal Dragon. Now make your first wish. Your wish has been granted. Here is your host, Tim Bridgewater.
What is up, everybody? My name is Tim Bridgewater. I am the host of a podcast called Rock the Dragon, a Dragon Ball Super podcast, which of course you can find on all the streaming outlets right now. Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, pretty much everywhere you can find your podcast. I want to start off by saying this. If you're someone who's just kind of coming along right now because, well, someone just recommended this to you and you have no idea what you're watching, once again, I hosted a podcast where I covered Dragon Ball Super, the entire series, for the better part of a year and a half. Okay, and that podcast is still up. I talked about every single episode of Dragon Ball Super, the English version, all the way for over 131 episodes. The entire series, plus bonus episodes, plus a few welcome back episodes, plus a few quarantine bonus episodes, etc. And now here I am with something brand new for you guys, just to kind of just to do something new, do something exciting. You know, I still have a few emails that kind of trickle in every now and then. And I felt kind of bad because I wasn't responding to those emails quickly enough. And I also felt kind of bad because normally I would read the emails on the podcast, right? But the podcast is done. For all intents and purposes, the podcast is over, but I didn't want to necessarily just be done completely. So what I decided to do is take the email segment from the podcast, which is called What Are You Saying, and turn it into sort of a little video version sort of a thing where I can at least address you guys' questions and comments if those emails happen to sort of trickle in along the way. If they don't come in, then I won't make these videos. But if they do come in and I can talk about them, I'll do a short video. This will not be included on the podcast, so don't look for this on the podcast feed. This is very much intended to be something super quick, super short, just to acknowledge the people that are still sort of discovering the podcast and still want to express their excitement or their thoughts on it and have any questions or comments about it, things that I may have said on the episodes. I can't promise you I'm going to remember everything, obviously, because the show has been over for a while. I even had to kind of refresh my memory a little bit just to do this. But I'm trying to remember to look here, keep my face visible, you know, all this technical stuff that they tell you to do when you're making videos. I apologize for the quality in the video. I really hate my webcam. I've always hated my webcam, but I love my computer. It's a really good computer. The webcam just always sucks. It's some weird resolution. It's some weird frame rate. If I continue to do this and I do more of these in the future, well, I'll gladly upgrade to something HD and stuff like that. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is, you may notice there's some fancy framing going on here. Okay, for those of you that were subscribed to my Patreon, you may remember that I had a little segment called Rock the Dragon Podcast Theater Presents, where I did commentary versions of several of the Dragon Ball Z movies. Okay, I would display them in this little TV screen with the frame. I've made it all fancy and nice for you guys. And then I would play the movie in the middle and I would give my commentary over the track. Now, the Patreon has since ended, of course, so I decided to, in order to not let all of this stuff go to waste, I'm going to use it here instead. I'm going to kind of refashion it a little bit so that it works for What Are You Saying. All right, so I just wanted to jump on here and say, for those of you who have been asking about me, I'm doing really well now. This pandemic and everything has obviously been tough for everybody, but I'm glad that it's starting to kind of ease up a little bit on us and make our lives a little bit easier. So thank you to the new fans, new listeners that have come along since the last episode. Thank you to anyone who's left me a review or a rating, etc. I do have a new review on Apple Podcasts that I want to read in a second, but I just want to say thank you guys for still thinking of me, still listening to the podcast, still checking in every now and then. And it's a really good feeling to know that I made something that a lot of people got a lot of enjoyment out of. So I just want to say a big thanks for that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get to the meat of this thing, okay? Once again, we're going to talk a little bit about one or two emails that I got pertaining to the podcast, some stuff about Vegeta, some stuff about Gogeta, and etc. Maybe a little Avatar, the last Airbender talk will be included in here as well. So first thing I want to start off with here, though, is a review that I got on Apple Podcasts. Actually, I got two reviews that I want to talk about since the last episode. The first one here is from Avenue Nick. It says The Perfect Companion Podcast. 5 stars. Thank you. Started watching Dragon Ball Super on Hulu last week and was suggested following along with this podcast by a friend. It's the perfect companion podcast to listen to after watching each episode. Helps spread out the binge watch. I think it's great to find that Tim and I share many of the same opinions throughout the watch. I'm just sad that I started watching the show so late because now I can't write in to share topical discussions with him when the show was airing each week. Avenue Nick, thank you so much. Thank you so much for writing that. Yeah, that kind of seems to be a common theme, right? People, you come along later and then you want to jump into the conversation, but by the time you get to the episode, it's been 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 months since I've seen that episode, so I don't really remember most of it, so I can't even really talk about it. But by all means, don't hesitate to send me an email anyway, rockthedragonpodcast@gmail.com. And since now I'm doing this little video segment thing, maybe we can still kind of talk about some of that stuff. Maybe I can kind of refresh my memories on it and things like that, you know, and maybe we can still get some answers for you. The next review is says 5 stars all the way. This is from Shinron RS3. I didn't have an iTunes account, but made one just to review this podcast. Tim is a great guy and very knowledgeable about Dragon Ball. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Shinron RS3. Guys, I am overwhelmed with the love that I have gotten for this podcast, and I've talked about this so many times. You can go back and listen to the final episode of the podcast, well, episode 131, and I really went into all of this really deeply, though, but I'm super stoked that people seem to care about my opinions about Dragon Ball as much as they do. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that and tell you guys thank you so much, and I'm just glad you've been a part of this journey. And, you know, we'll see what the future holds as far as more stuff, right? Okay, so the main event here is to take it to my email segment, which is called What Are You Saying? So once again, if you have a question, comment about anything, send me an email at rockthedragonpodcast@gmail.com. But for now, I'm going to jump into these emails that I got, and we're going to keep this kind of short and sweet. I got an email here from John. This was way... First of all, I want to apologize to both of you guys because these emails are a couple months old at this point. You know, life happens. I have things to do. I have work. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to just respond to you guys, through email but that's just, I don't know. You know me. I have to make something. I have to make a video. I have to make a podcast. I can't just send you guys an email back. But I was kind of debating on back and forth on what the best method was for that. So I decided to do this. So I hope you guys were enjoying this, and I hope it was worth the wait for you. Okay, John says Dragon Ball Day. This was back on February 28th, 21. Hi, Tim. Guess what? Today is the day the first episode of Dragon Ball aired in Japan. Nice, right? Anyway, just checking in to ask a question. Who do you like more? Gogeta or Vegeta? Which one do you think will win in a fight? Ooh. Anyway, hope everything is going well. Have a good day, John. John, thank you so much for your email. Okay, so who do I like more between Gogeta and Vegeta? Okay, I had to think long and hard about this because the first thing I thought of is that both of these characters have barely been featured in the Dragon Ball world, period, right? There's only a handful of times that Vegeta has appeared. There's only a handful of times that Gogeta has appeared. So it's kind of almost hard to pick a favorite because they just haven't been around a lot. Not only that, they're kind of more or less the same character. Obviously, they have different characteristics. And one of them, Goku's personality shows a little bit more, and the other, Vegeta's personality shows a little bit more. I want to say that in Vegeta is probably a little bit more. So they're both kind of equally. They're both kind of equally Vegeta and Goku, right? Because I'll tell you this. I'll start off by saying this. I think I prefer Gogeta, and here's why. Okay. First of all, Vegeta was prominently featured during the Buu saga, okay, which is sort of notoriously, and I think mostly agreed upon, sort of the worst arc of Dragon Ball Z. Okay, there's a lot of shit that went on in that arc that a lot of people didn't care for. A lot of stuff I didn't care for. The Boo arc, that entire saga, was my least favorite part of Dragon Ball Z. Was there still some things to enjoy about it? For sure. But I immediately associate Vegito with that arc. So pretty much everything that came along within that arc, I wasn't really a big fan of. Now, I don't have a problem with Vegito as a concept, but since he was just tied in with all the Boo stuff and the Super Boo and it went on, it seemed like it went on forever. And you know, being turned into candy and all this stuff, it's just a little bit much. And I feel like the few times that Gogeta showed up, which for the most part was only in the movies, right? He was only in about 1 or 2 movies. I think about the Janemba movie. I think it was Fusion Reborn. That's the one that comes immediately to mind. There may be one more that he was in. And then, of course, he was made canon thanks to Dragon Ball Super Broly, and he was in that movie. But Vegito showed up in the Boo saga. He also showed up later in Dragon Ball Super. Okay, remember he came back later on when they were fighting Zamasu, fused Zamasu toward the end. You know, they fused and Vegito came along and he was in that. And both of those characters were also featured in Super Dragon Ball Heroes, but that's not a series that I've seen in its entirety. I can't really talk enough about that to be able to use that as a basis for comparison. I'll tell you this also, they both equally piss me off in Dragon Ball Fighters. Okay, not one of them pisses me off more than the other. They both piss me off in Dragon Ball Fighters. You know how you kind of have your favorite fighters that, you know, that you have characters that you don't mind fighting, and then you hate. You have some that you just completely fucking hate, and that would be Gogeta and Vegito to me. Well, 2 of them. Anyway, so I would say that my preference would be Gogeta. I feel like the few times that Gogeta showed up, he made a really big impact in a short amount of time, right? We didn't need to see him a bunch. I think he barely even talks. Whereas Vegito runs his mouth nonstop because he's kind of like, he's got the cockiness of Vegeta and then he's got sort of the silliness of Goku. Another reason why I think I prefer Gogeta over Vegito is due to the type of fusion, right? On the one hand, with Vegito, we've got fusion by way of the Potara earrings, which is essentially just getting the earrings from a Supreme Kai or a deity of some sort, or one of these guys who wears these earrings, and putting one character puts one on one ear, one character puts one on the other ear, and then they fuse together. It's pretty simple, straightforward. I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy to come by, but it's pretty simple. And as far as I understand, there's really no limit to who can fuse. Now, they may have said that at some point, but the simple fact to me that, and my memory's a little bit fuzzy on this, so please don't, you know, be too hard on me here. But I remember Supreme Kai and Kibito fusing into one person, right? And that was due to the earrings. So it's not like their power levels would have been similar. I mean, a Supreme Kai, by all intents and purposes, should have been a lot stronger than Kibito. On the other hand, we've got Gogeta, who uses the what do they call the Metamarons fusion dance technique, which is kind of, I mean, yeah, sort of in theory, it's kind of silly that they dance and they do the whole thing and all of that. But I mean, it's not really that silly when you think about it, because there are a lot of cultures throughout the world that have a history of using dance to symbolize certain things. To symbolize things, to summon things as a rite of passage. I mean, there's a lot of different ways choreographed dances are used to sort of elevate everything. So to me, it always kind of made more sense that they would do that. Now, that's another reason why I kind of prefer Gogeta over Vegito, because I feel like the fusion technique takes more concentration and focus. One, you just put on earrings. The other one is a complicated dance that if you mess up even one little tiny thing, it'll mess the entire thing up, and you have to start over, and you have to wait some time in between. And I guess one downside of the Gogeta dance and Gotenks dance is that it doesn't last very long, right? On the one hand, we've got one that lasts only about 30 minutes, and the Potara earring fusion is supposed to be permanent. Every time they've ever talked about it, they said it was permanent, but it's never been permanent. So I think, you know, obviously there's something there that's wrong as well. But in terms of preference on that level, I think I'm going to go with Gogeta. Now, technically, I was talking about the amount of appearances that they've made. Gogeta may have had more technical appearances than Vegeta. But when Vegeta was around, he was around a lot longer. Okay, so remember the Boo arc where he showed up and he was there and for what felt like 28 episodes? It was just a lot. It was a lot. And sometimes less is more. And I think that's why I prefer Gogeta, because when he shows up, it's serious business. He usually kind of gets straight to the point, and then that's it. And and I didn't mention Dragon Ball GT at all here. Obviously, Gogeta was in Dragon Ball GT as well. Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. We're not really counting GT here, okay? Because I don't really remember much about that. And they just recently released Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta on Dragon Ball FighterZ for some reason. I mean, as if there's not enough versions of Goku and Vegeta on there, but they did that, and I was thinking, okay, here's another annoying, overly powered character, and we got that. So now the only remaining question at this point is who do I think would win in a fight between Gogeta and Vegeta? It's a very hard question to answer. Once again, I don't think we've seen either of these characters enough to be able to get a good sort of measure of their abilities, power level, and all of that kind of stuff, especially because they're usually somehow cut short before they even get a chance to really showcase anything, especially in the case of, say, Gogeta, where his fusion only lasts about 30 minutes. Now, I'm inclined to say Vegeta would win, because if they just went at it full force, hardcore for 30 minutes straight, and then Gogeta separated, well, then obviously Vegeta would be the winner in that case. But the question is that if Gogeta got the best of Vegeta in the 30 minutes that he was allotted, would that be enough to do enough damage? As we stand right now, both of these characters can go Super Saiyan Blue. So I guess even though I prefer Gogeta, just to kind of wrap this up, I guess I would go with Vegeta because, well, his fusion I forget exactly how they split in Dragon Ball Super. I remember in Dragon Ball Z they split because they got eaten by Boo, and for some reason that made them split. And I think in Super maybe their energy got depleted or something. But even so, technically they would be able to last a lot longer than Gogeta. And power level wise, I don't think that one is stronger than the other, and I'm not sure why one would be. They're the same people, they're just coming together with different techniques. Unless one of those techniques just automatically comes with a power boost that's more than the other, that would be the only other factor that I could say that would determine that. And I don't know enough about it to say for sure. But that was a great question, and obviously it generated a lot of conversation. So thanks for asking that. Okay, now I'm going to jump on over to the next email here that I have from Matt. Matt, long time no talk, my man, for sure. Matt says, yo, Tim, long time no talk, man. I hope all is well. Just wanted to check in and share some new info with you that you may or may not have heard. First, once again, this was back in March. First, I want to say I miss having your podcast around. I started listening to Rock the Dragon podcast right around the time the Resurrection F arc ended, which prompted me to go back and binge the first 20-something episodes, including episode 0, and hadn't missed an episode since. But you might be surprised But you might be surprised to I know that. Oh, okay, it's a typo. But you might be surprised to know that, as big of an Avatar fan as I am, I hadn't seen the last 2 seasons of Legend of Korra at the time that you were recording Republic City Report. Last year, I finally got around to finishing Korra and was mind blown at how it made me fall in love with the series all over again. And that was only amplified once I realized I could listen to RCR and get the same experience I got as I watched through the English dub of DBS. And I was correct. Republic City Report was an amazing podcast, and I just wanted to share with you the fact that your pod has become synonymous with those 2 shows. Whenever I rewatch a season or an arc, I find myself going back to the podcast and listening again. So thank you for the content you created. I drive very far for work each day, and although I was late as hell, RCR became one of the high points of my latter half of 2020. I just want to pause right there and say, wow, Matt. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it's still pretty mind-boggling to me that I have listeners that have been listening to me talk for as long as I have. Okay, some of you guys, came upon at the start of the podcast from episode 0 and then to the very end. Some of you guys came along later, went back and listened to all the episodes. I mean, I remember getting emails and reviews of people saying that, they didn't even care about Dragon Ball Super. They had heard bad things about it. They stumbled upon my podcast, listened to me talk about it, went back, watched the show, listened to every episode of the podcast, and they enjoyed every second of it. So I appreciate that very much, man. And for those of you who don't know, I also hosted a podcast called Republic City Report, where I talked about the Legend of Korra every week. That podcast is still up too. So Republic City Report, look that up. If you happen to be one of the many people that have gotten reinvested in the Avatar: The Last Airbender world and universe in 2020, thanks to Netflix, then there's an entire podcast that I did talking about the Legend of Korra, which is of course the successor to Avatar: The Last Airbender. It does not cover book 1 because by the time I got the idea to do the podcast, it was too late to do book 1. But I did pick up with book 2. But I did do one episode. The very first episode is one where I talk about Airbender, and I also talk about book 1 of Legend of Korra. And then it goes to book 2 and then that point on. Matt, I'm so impressed and fucking ecstatic that you went back and listened to that. And thank you so much for doing that. I mean, it's still up there, and that was my other favorite podcast. I've done 3 podcasts. One was called Geekly Dose, and then I did Republic City Report, and then I did Rock the Dragon. And the two, without a doubt, the biggest, most successful ones, I say biggest, they're not big, but the most successful ones were definitely Republic City Report and this one. Rock the Dragon has become a little bit bigger than Republic City Report ever had a chance to become. But I definitely love that show, and I even had some listeners that came over from that podcast to this one. So shout out to you guys too. All right, it says here, I wanted to know if you heard that the Avatar creators have recently been given their own studio to create numerous Avatar content, including multiple new animated series and movies, virtually creating an Avatar universe. It makes me very excited, and I can't help but smile at the idea of this happening. I know you have a load of stuff going on, but I just want to say if you decide to do a pod down the line on some of this new stuff, you definitely have listeners ready to go. Here's a link if you haven't seen it yet. Take care, man. Glad to check in with you. Matt, thank you so much, man. It's always great to hear from my listeners of the podcast. I hope all of you guys are doing well. I hope most of you decide to come over to the Facebook, and then you'll see this. Because this is not going to be a part of the podcast. It's just be sort of a bonus video for those of you who happen to be paying attention. Yes. So I did hear about that. As you can imagine, I had several friends hit me up immediately when this news broke. I actually saw it myself, I think, from the Legend of Korra Facebook page, because I liked that page a long time ago, just as being a fan, of course, and someone who did a podcast about it. So I found out, yes, the creators, that would be Mike DiMartino, Brian Konietzko, have now been sort of given the green light, and through Nickelodeon, from what I understand, that they're going to they're starting their own sort of Avatar studios, basically a whole production company created for and based around the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. A studio company that is going to is that right? Production company that is going to basically create properties that span out from the Avatar universe. And have we heard about anything as cool and significant as this since we heard about, Disney purchasing Lucasfilm and Lucasfilm just deciding, hey, we're going to blow this entire Star Wars universe out even further by creating content for this. We're doing animated shorts, we're doing movies, we're doing shows for Disney Plus, right? And Marvel Studios being right there sort of along with that. And now the perfect addition to all of this to me is the Avatar world. I've always said, even when I was doing my podcast, that the Avatar universe is a universe that is just as big and expansive as Star Wars. I mean, it did such an incredible job expanding that universe to where you could just see the potential for hundreds and thousands of different stories to happen in it. I mean, just right off the top of my head, you can tell a story about every single Avatar they ever made. I mean, we only learned about a couple of them. Roku, a little bit. We learned about, of course, Korra and Aang a little bit. We heard about Avatar Wan, who was the very first one. We learned about who was the big Avatar, Kyoshi. We learned about who else? Who was I don't remember the name of the water bender one that was before Aang. But yeah, my point is that there's a lot, man. There's a lot of stories, and you don't even have to tell stories about the avatars. You can tell stories about just regular benders. You can tell stories about the Kyoshi warriors. You can tell stories about the Fire Nation and the Air Nomads and the Air Nomads before they were wiped out. I mean, there's really no limit to stories they can tell. And this news, of course, broke a couple months ago, and I haven't really checked into it since then. But I don't think has been any official announcements on any specific projects and what those would be. Of course, everyone is hoping for some sort of follow-up to Avatar: The Last Airbender, possibly one that chronicles, the differences between the time that happened between Airbender and Korra. That's something that I think most of us would like to see. There were a couple graphic novels that kind of touched upon some of that stuff, but we would love to see a new series that revolves around that, or a movie that revolves around that. I'm ecstatic about anything that comes out of that world. Obviously, I have a major investment in that world, just as a fan, and also as someone who's done multiple podcasts and projects about this kind of stuff. So I'm ecstatic. Of course, this came right along the heels of the devastating news that the co-creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender were no longer going to be involved in the Netflix live action Avatar: The Last Airbender, because that's something I think I talked about in one of the previous episodes of the podcast. That was one of the most devastating things I had to hear in 2020, I guess that was announced in 2020. Toward the end of it, I was really excited for that Netflix show. I mean, obviously the Shyamalan version, the version that we don't want to talk about, left a lot to be desired in terms of what can be done with that world when it's handled properly. And here was kind of a second chance for us to do that with the co-creators at the helm, doing it right, doing a series, not having to force an entire book into a 90-minute movie, because that made sense to do. No, they can really kind of spread this thing out with a Netflix series. Obviously not one that's going to be like 30 episodes. It'll probably be 10 or something, but that's 10 solid hours of maybe book one. That's plenty of time. A lot of that stuff they'll have to cut out and change and arrange and stuff. And apparently that's part of the reason why the creators decided to leave. Creative differences, seeing things differently. Apparently Netflix isn't going to want to sort of follow the path that the creators set forth, and that's always a mistake. When are we going to learn that that's a mistake? There's probably a few small examples in pop culture where taking something away from the creators was a good decision, right? And I think more recently, something like, say, The Mandalorian is probably a good example of that. We all thought those new Star Wars movies were going to be a lot better than the prequel movies because George Lucas didn't really have anything to do with those. But do we still feel that way now that we've seen those movies? I don't know. I think had he still had a nice hand in there, even if he wasn't directing them himself, maybe if he still wrote them or co-wrote them or something, then maybe those movies would have turned out better. So my point is that keep the creators involved always, especially the creators of Avatar, which has proven themselves time and time again. This is one of the greatest animated shows of all time, without a doubt. So obviously these guys know what they're doing. And coming back around to the point here, I'm not surprised that Nickelodeon decided to come to their senses and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and just let these guys have their own production company where they create more content. There's still a part of me that's a little bit disappointed that they went back to Nickelodeon, because if you followed The Legend of Korra when it was live when it was airing, you followed my podcast, you know they didn't treat that show right. They didn't. You know, there's a lot of controversy and a lot of stuff that they did that they shouldn't have done, and you know, really backing the creators into the corners and just like pulling Korra off of network television and making it online only, and then they would show 2 episodes back to back. It's like they almost didn't care about it. But thanks to the resurgence of Avatar and, you know, Legend of Korra on Netflix, which I have to assume has something to do with this decision, now they're realizing, oh crap, yeah, there's still a lot of money to be made in this world. So what better way to let these guys completely do their thing than letting them and financing and having them do their own Avatar studios, right? And I think that this is the best idea I've heard of probably since Marvel Studios became a thing. And they had all the rights to their characters, and then they started off with a plan, and they decided they were going to push forward with that universe and give it the care and love that it deserved. And I think that's what we have to expect here from Avatar Studios and the co-creators. At least I'm hoping. Will I return to some sort of a podcast form for one or more of those shows? I have no idea. We'll see where they are. We'll see what point in life I'm at. I always say the same thing every time you guys ask me if I want to do a new podcast about something. Say, I'll see. I have to see. Right? I mean, it's not easy making these things. It takes a lot of time, a lot of hard work, a lot of talking to myself. But I'll never completely take it off the table, as I'll also never take the possibility of doing another Dragon Ball podcast off the table either. It just depends on what happens and what point, you know, what's going on and what the situation is like. So I'll just kind of reevaluate as that comes along. But Matt, I want to thank you so much for sending me that email. All the kind words, I appreciate. This went on way longer than I thought it was going to do, but I hope you guys kind of enjoy this. It's just something that kind of tides you over if you just happen to miss my voice weekly. Tides you over until the next time. If I happen to get 1 or 2 more emails that trickle in over the next few weeks or months, then maybe I'll jump back on here and do another one of these. But we're just going to kind of play it by ear and just kind of see what happens. So I'm just going to say thank you once again. I'm going to roll out, guys. So for Rock the Dragon podcast and this special bonus video version episode of What Are You Saying? I'm Tim Bridgewater. I see you next time, and keep on rocking the dragon.